Hello there. I wanted to talk about a specific issue that UF has, and if they fix this issue, I believe UF can grow into a much greater game for both casual and competitive players alike. The main issue I want to focus on, if you couldn't see from the title, is the lack of acknowledgement for running back as a respected and viable position. Even with many people wanting running backs to be in the game, UF still hasn't done anything to make running back or handoffs viable. Now I know what everyone who plays UF is thinking. Why should we include running backs to be viable in UF? What can we gain for having it when they aren't technically required to win games as of right now? What are the potential problems and solutions to making running backs viable, and if it is overall worth it, and if they can truly be made into a legitimate position? I will be answering all of those questions later in this video, so please keep watching so I can explain all of it. First off, let's start off at the beginning. In the FBU days, running back was never really considered a position in many Roblox football games. FBU was no exception to this. At the time when I suggested it to be viable and made much better, I had a mindset that running back needed to phase and tank through tackles and walk out of it without a scratch like prime Marshawn Lynch. Later on, I realized that this was the wrong direction to take when looking to make running backs viable, but that is for later. At the time, a bunch of their arguments against me made no sense as to why running backs shouldn't be viable. Some didn't want to see running backs become viable because it was useless. This didn't really make sense because no philosophy in game balance used this as a balancing tool. That is basically like buffing the top tier characters in a fighting game because everyone uses them, and nerfing the bottom tier characters because nobody uses them. Imagine how overpowered Smash Bros. Brawl Meta Knight would be if this type of balance philosophy was followed. There were also people telling me to join a league. Obviously you can tell this argument aged like milk, considering literally nobody used running backs or handoffs in any league I've been to, and even when they did, it was only for one play and didn't really accomplish much unless it was to troll. The last argument I remember off the top of my head was that someone used a side game mode called career mode as an excuse to not give running back any help because career mode would make it viable before its release in FBU. Don't get me wrong, there were a ton of expectations going into career mode at the time, and I even went into a VC on the FBU Discord with multiple people chanting Football Universe an hour before the game mode was released to the public. However, when it was released, I tried to see what very interesting things they offered to running back because I was told they would make them viable. For context, they gave most positions in football specific stats they could increase, and they can increase their stats the more games they played. For running back, however, they essentially gave it barely anything unique to the position except for statistics based on truck. And before you ask, yes, truck was also a game pass you had to pay Robux for, or in other words, real money in normal circumstances. So they essentially made running back a pay-to-play position if it somehow turned out to be viable. What's the funniest part is that running back was hardly ever used even during the game mode's hype because it didn't have much going for it. It felt like a slap in the face, considering the person who made the argument was an FBU dev themselves that told me that a casual game mode was going to make a position viable. Yes, a dev used a casual game mode that fell off after its initial release as an excuse to not buff the position. I do not know if it was out of spite, hatred for the non-existent position, or hatred of me. I cannot say how this was even an argument for them at the time. This was where it felt like the position's viability would be frozen in place, never to see the light of day. After career mode, some time has passed, and it was announced that UF would be announced to the public. A successor, no, an upgrade to FBU. There was a ton going for it, a ton of hype, since it was said that the game would be almost a new experience compared to FBU. Many people were stoked on when it was going to release, me included. I was even told by one of the head developers that they were willing to give running backs the buffs they deserved. This was every running back's moment. This is what everyone has been waiting for. Left in the dust for so long. Finally it is time to put the position in the forefront along with the other positions and fulfill their destiny. Become the playmaking and respected position it was always meant to be. Wait, sorry, what is this? I'm sorry. They nerfed it? Okay, so for context on what happened, They basically made it similar to how the quarterback would be in his throwing stance animation, and if he throws the football, or passes the line of scrimmage, the quarterback transitions into a running stance animation. You would think the running back wouldn't be in this throwing stance and would just straight up go into the running stance once the running back receives the handoff, right? It should be the case since most of the time running backs don't normally throw unless it's some Philly special cheese, but you can easily do a much better version of it by just passing it backwards, so it makes no sense to do it anyways. But guess what? They go into the quarterback throwing stance anyway for literally no reason. Why is this such a problem? If you didn't know, truck is an ability that you can use anywhere in the game as long as you're in the running animation while also having the football. For a quarterback, they can't use truck when they are in their throwing stance, so the only way they can use it is if they are past line of scrimmage. If you can put 2 and 2 together, it simply means the running back cannot use truck behind the line of scrimmage provided he even has the game pass and if he actually wanted to use the ability. Of course you didn't really have to worry about it as much in FBU from what I remember, so it just felt like a mishap or a completely unnecessary change that did more harm than good for the running back. Not to mention it also looks janky and awkward seeing a handoff occur, so it just felt like they weren't even trying to make running back a position at all, like it felt people were being misled and lied to. I could not believe what was happening. Even after when one of the head developers told me they would make running back a legitimate position, where it should have been one of the main positions on the offense, only for it to be worse than it already was back in FBU. I feel so bad for the people who legitimately play running back, if they aren't going to get the help they need in the upgraded version of FBU on release. What hope could they have to get anything else in the future? On top of that, the main reason why they didn't go through with the running back changes was that it was too OP, but let's give wide receivers a speed boost off the line of scrimmage. Like they haven't been the most used and centralized position in the entire game. For context, if you want to know what they were planning to do with running backs, they were looking to give it something known as health tackling. Health tackling was basically a new mechanic exclusively for handoffs to where the running back would have a health bar, and depending on where on the body he was tackled, he would lose a varying amount of health, and once that health reaches 0, he would finally go down. Now before you ask if this was basically a second truck with extra steps, it was. So now we talk about the current stage of running back, where people are still wanting it to be changed while trying to be respectful, but haven't gotten a word on if they will ever do it, if at all. So what went wrong with how running backs should have been viable? It's simple. We shouldn't have treated running back like someone who can say I am invincible while shedding through 5 tackles at once. Instead I looked into what made running backs like Barry Sanders one of the best running backs of all time in the NFL. I am referring to his elusiveness. So before how I would go about changing running back in the right direction, the question has yet to be answered on why they are ever needed in the first place if you don't need to run with the football to win a game in UF. While it is true that you are not required to hand off with the football, or run with the football as the quarterback to win a game, the same can be said by how you also are not required to pass or throw the football to win a game either. While you can just use one or the other to win a game, a team is even greater if they balance both well to perfection. That does raise one problem with that, since the quarterback usually runs more than the running back, since there is no single benefit to handing off the football. Of course some Roblox football games like Football Fusion 2 and Gridiron Football 2 gave handoffs some benefits when using them. UF just didn't care like they did. While Football Fusion 2 did provide a truck game pass similar to FBU, what they did different was that it was exclusive towards handoffs, making it far easier to balance over FBU or even UF, since anyone who can run with the football can use it, even the quarterback. Did it see much usage after that? No, not really, but at the very least they did something to help running back, which I can acknowledge them for that. Gridiron Football 2 on the other hand gave handoffs a similar benefit to where the running back could shed 1 or 2 tackles before going down. Of course they had a default offensive line, and offensive line as NPCs, so they really didn't need to change more than they could have with running back. Is it the best Roblox football game? Probably not, but was it a lot more fun to watch with handoffs having a use in the game? Yes! So it's easy to say there is a ton of benefits into making running backs and handoffs viable inside of UF. Making running backs viable and modernized would bring enhanced gameplay depth, allow for more strategic options, increase team coordination, and the potential for unique playstyles. Why does adding a new playstyle matter? Think of it like owning an ice cream shop, and you just recently added 1 or 2 more new ice cream flavors. Yes, they may not be necessary on paper, but they help attract more players due to having a much bigger variety. It is the same with adding more playstyles, so it can add a refreshing twist to the game like Park Mode had, but in the actual base gameplay itself. If it is balanced properly as well, you will have all to gain and nothing to lose. However, there have been a couple arguments I have seen against this even with all of these benefits. What if it becomes used every play with everyone fighting for a handoff and it just becomes that all game? While that can be a small problem, that problem will only exist if it is used 100% of the time with zero counterplay being known, or in other words if it was really overpowered. The problem is that it feels like it puts the very worst case scenario in a vacuum with no other possibility. The only other time I could see this coming relatively close to that scenario is on its initial release of those changes. Think about it, everyone is going to want to try the new thing, see the new changes in action. Not to mention people will learn how to play against it, so they naturally won't have a counter right away, so it might take more than just a few days to adapt and develop the meta. The defense may not be able to run the same cover 3 shenanigans like they used to, offering more variety of coverages on defense unless there is a be-all end-all defense like we have now. All that stuff is completely normal since every game goes through that. UF isn't any different. Another argument I heard was that running backs only fit in a Madden-style game. This argument doesn't really make sense to me considering other casual football games outside of Madden have a running back in some way. If you want to look at Roblox football games to be more specific, Football Fusion 2 and Gridiron Football 2 made running back into an actual position that has at least some sort of identity. I don't see why UF cannot do this either since they are more than capable of doing so given how good of quality the stadiums and cosmetics are, especially the touchdown celebrations. On another note, it just feels like a slap in the face since you are alienating a part of the player base no matter how big it may be, and that usually isn't a good direction to take. If wide receivers who play the position for example weren't feeling that it was rewarding or satisfying and they wanted to feel like another game, how would they feel if you said nah, deal with it, go play X game instead if you want them to feel rewarding and satisfying to play? They would probably feel like they were slapped in the face too, right? Running back and offensive line may not be the most popular, but some people actually like them because they want to feel like part of the whole team rather than a lone wolf on the prowl like toss-up warriors try to be, and football is more like the former regardless of any video game or adaptation of football. My case still remains on how it is such a problem if it allows for more depth that can attract new players, because while you don't have to hand off the football, running backs should never under any circumstance be a detriment to your team or even a troll position. Now the moment you have all been waiting for. The changes I think could be made to help running back establish an identity and remain a valuable asset to Roblox football. So, now that I have explained why running back can make the game healthier, what would I do? I cannot change too much of the game's core because they wouldn't like that, and giving it a second truck wouldn't be a good idea either since it could cause balance issues. So the best option by process of elimination like I said before is to give running back an elusive ability. I have a few suggestions in mind. Actually before I say them, I think it is a good idea to make a couple changes before we go into the abilities. The first change is to nerf blocking since it will be compensation for giving running backs more power and independence, and also because blocking is really overpowered. The second change is remove the QB stands when receiving a handoff since it is very inconvenient for the running back. The first suggestion is when the quarterback hands the football off to the running back will become invisible for 1 or 1.5 seconds. If you don't know, sprinting straight ahead in a UF-sized football field makes you travel roughly 4 yards per second, and that is with the stamina bar, so they aren't going to be immediately past the line of scrimmage while invisible since the QB is usually much further away when hiking the football. The one problem I obtained from this is that this change may not be enough to make running back viable because of how easy it could be to counter, since you aren't going to gain much yardage if you try to go to the outside while invisible, and the inside could get easily jammed by a defensive lineman or two. However, a solution to this, if you were going to add this, is to combine it with another ability, or maybe two abilities. Another possible solution was to make the invisibility last longer, but to compensate, make it so if the defense is anywhere close to the running back by a certain distance, they can see them, or at the very least a silhouette of the running back. This can make it so the running back can't be too careless, and can offer a bit more counterplay to the invisibility. And before you ask, it's invisibility, meaning you can't see them, not invincibility. Please do not get them confused. The second ability you could add is to give the running back a dash or two when the ball is handed off to them. Of course they can use this at any time they like, as long as they have the football in play. It is the most straightforward option out of all of them, if you only want to put in this only ability, but it can work and can offer just as much skill expression as the invisibility ability. Oh, and also if you dash towards a defensive player, make sure they get stopped in their tracks instead of flying 15 yards ahead for no reason. The third ability is a bit more unique out of the three, but I would suggest giving the running back clones to work with. No, not cloning in a way main league wide receivers use the term, I mean clones as in duplicates of the running back. It can work where after the quarterback handoffs to the running back, can create one or multiple copies of itself to confuse the defense, making the defense guess which one is the real one. The only ones who know beforehand are the running back's teammates, where the fake running backs could have a different color jersey than the one they have on, or may not be holding the football on their screen entirely. You can also add the possibility of giving them control on where the clones go in some way, using the play designer or manually by the quarterback, or running back. What would happen if you tackled one of these fake running backs? Well, you could get creative, but the most obvious would be that the tackler would be down like they tackled the real one, except the fake running back would disappear or fade away. Heck, you could also make their vision blurry or dark, or make them on the ground for a longer amount of time than normal if you wanted to. While it is a weird ability and is the least realistic out of the three, I think it can work, especially if you combine it with other abilities. The best thing about it is that you don't need to choose only one ability, you can combine two of them or even all three of the abilities. I don't want to pull any League of Legends examples because some people might not play it, nor want to, but if you look at abilities like Wukong's W, Shaco's ultimate, Nico's W, Shaco's Q, LeBlanc's passive, etc., they use a combination of these abilities really well in their own unique ways. Heck, Wukong's W especially uses all three of the abilities I mentioned. Of course, they may not be the most realistic, but like the community has said before, if they want to set themselves apart from a game like Madden, these potential changes can give you a unique experience. So if UF can't lose in making running backs good, especially with changes that add skill expression to the game, why wouldn't they be good suggestions? Let me know in the comments down below what you think of these abilities I came up with, or if you have any other questions about UF entirely. I may not have played Roblox football all of my life, but I believe UF is a game with a ton of potential, especially to be competitive, and that is saying a ton for a Roblox game. To be honest, if I didn't care about its success, why would I make this video suggesting something on what can make the game more attractive towards new players, because that is what they have been liking to see when recording this video. I also want to say that no dev, or former dev watching this should take this as an attack on them, or give anyone a reason to harass them, or anyone else in the UF community. While some people I have talked to may not have been the most reasonable, they still deserve respect like all people should. Even I can sometimes mess that concept up. However, what I am asking is that if any dev or staff that is watching this, please consider my suggestions, or at the very least be inspired to go off of my suggestions in some way. Like I said, the game has so much potential to be a good Roblox game, even the best Roblox game. All I think it needs is a push for more engaging and rewarding gameplay for all players. And if you are just a member of the UF community, share this video with any staff or dev in UF. It would help out a ton to get these changes across in some way. But either way, I hope you guys enjoyed watching and I will see you guys next time.